everybody, I'm Pia from Stitches and Scraps. Today I'm going to show you how to make the Impetuous crochet cowl. Knit Picks and We Crochet sent me some of their shine worsted weight yarn to use for this project. The colors I'm using are pistachio and wisteria. For our first row, we need 21 single crochet. So start by chaining 22 and then turn your chain over and skipping the first chain, do a single crochet into the back bump of every chain after that. So that will give you 21 single crochet. Working into the back bump like this leaves a pretty edge on the other side that's going to make seaming much easier. If you absolutely hate working in the back bump, you don't have to. It just makes it easier to seam later. On row 2, we're going to establish our mesh pattern. Chain 1 and turn. Single crochet in the first stitch. Now we start a repeating pattern. Chain 3. Skip 2 stitches and then single crochet in the next stitch. And keep doing that part. Chain 3, skip 2 stitches, single crochet in the next stitch. Now when we get to the last 2 stitches, chain 2, skip just the one last stitch and single crochet in the last stitch. So now our mesh is established. You can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 chain spaces. This one at the end is a little bit smaller, and that's normal because that's how we're going to stagger our spaces across the length. So let's start the next row, and this is the row that will be repeated for the whole rest of the pattern. Chain 1 and turn, and single crochet in the first stitch. Now you may find it helpful from this point forward to mark the first stitch of your row with a stitch marker, because it can get a little bit floppy with all of the chain spaces, and it's easier to find it if you have a stitch marker in it later. Now we're going to skip this first space. It's a smaller space. We're just going to skip it, okay? We're going to chain 3. So we're skipping this space and we're skipping this first stitch, and then we're going to single crochet into the next space. We're always going to skip the stitches from this point forward and only work into the spaces. So very simply, we go chain 3 and then work into the next space. Now notice that when I am working into these spaces, I'm inserting my hook into the actual space, not into any one of the chains specifically. You want to make sure you're not going into any particular chain, but you want to go down into the whole space down here. That's what makes the pattern so fast and so easy, actually. Single crochet into the space. Now when we get to this last space, now what we're going to do is we're just going to chain 2, okay? And we're going to single crochet in the last stitch. So now you can see that that mimics what we had last time, where we had that smaller space at the end that we're going to skip. Now we have that smaller space at this end, and we're going to skip that on the next row. So let's look at one more row. So chain 1, turn your work. First you single crochet in the first stitch. You always single crochet in the first stitch, okay? We're going to skip this chain space and we're going to skip all of the stitches for the rest of the row, right? So chain 3, skip this first chain space, skip this stitch and single crochet in the next chain space. Now chain 3 and single crochet in the next chain space. And that's the whole pattern right there in that one row. Once you get started, it's the same all the way across for the rest of the pattern. Now when we come to the end, remember you do a chain 2 and then you single crochet in that last stitch, and that's where we place the marker, so it's really easy. You just single crochet where you placed the marker. You don't absolutely need that. It's only if you have trouble finding that stitch when you come to it. Now the other thing that you may want to mark is that row 1 was the right side. Now I'm used to looking at my stitches and knowing that this is the wrong side of a stitch, so I know that this was the wrong side. But if you're not as familiar with looking at it, then you may want to, while you can still count your rows, place a marker on row 1 somewhere on the right side of row 1 to mark that that is the right side row. Again, the placing of the markers is optional, and I did put in the pattern after you do row 1 that you might want to mark that row as the right side, but it's optional only if you have trouble seeing it without the marker. So now we're going to repeat this same mesh pattern, and you can see the mesh that's forming here. We're going to repeat this same mesh pattern until we reach the length that we want. Keep in mind it's going to stretch a little bit when you block it. So I went about 60 rows for the one that I did, but you can go longer if you want a bigger cowl or shorter if you want a smaller cowl. You can also even make a scarf, make it really long. However you'd like to do it, whatever length you want is fine. The other thing you can do is change colors anytime you want. When you get to the last stitch of your row, start the single crochet, then bring up your new color and go ahead and finish the single crochet with the new color. And now you're ready to start your new row. Oop, just one chain. You're ready to start your new row with your new color. And you can do this as many times as you want. You will have to fasten off the yarns when you change the color, so I'd have to fasten off the green, which means more ends to weave in, the more stripes you do. But as many stripes, as many color changes as you want, you can change them wherever you want. I finished row 60, and to be clear, it's 60 rows total, including this starting row of single crochet. So it's not 60 rows of mesh, it's 59 rows of mesh plus this one row of single crochet. You'll notice I did change colors to the purple. I was going to run out of the green, honestly there wasn't enough. And that's the cool part of this pattern. It's so versatile, you can change colors anytime you want. You could do 10 stripes, 20 stripes, 2 stripes, whatever you want with the colors. Keep going till you run out, add a new color, however you like to do it. It's gonna look good whatever you do with the colors. So this is row 60, and since row 1 was a right side row, this is a wrong side row. The reason I've said in the pattern that you want to end after a wrong side row at this point is just so that the next row, the edging row, can also be a right side row. That way both of these edges will be right side rows and they'll match when you join them. But honestly, the difference is not that great. Nobody's going to notice when you're wearing it. So if you've lost track of what's the right side and what's the wrong side, it's really not a big deal. You can go ahead and do the edging. It's not going to make that much of a difference. But in any case, this is after row 60, and now I'm going to go ahead and do the edging row, which is just a single crochet row. So we chain 1 and turn. Then I'm going to single crochet in this first stitch, and then single crochet in the first space, which is that small space that's the chain 2 space. Okay, now starts the repeat. Single crochet in the next stitch, and then 2 single crochet in the next space. And keep doing that all the way across. Single crochet in the next stitch, 2 single crochet in the next space. Stitch, 2 in the space. 1 in the stitch and 2 in the space. and then we're going to finish off by doing a single crochet in the very last stitch. Now that should give us 21 single crochet, just like we had at this side. So it's time now to join the two ends together to make it into a cowl. I'm going to chain one and turn my work, and then fold these two ends together. Now you can put the ends together first and then chain one and turn. I just find it easier to chain one and turn first. So I'm putting these two ends together. Notice this is the wrong side because now I've turned. This is the right side here, the wrong side there. So I've got my right sides together. Right side, okay? My right sides are touching. Chain one, slip stitch in the first stitch. Okay. Now there's 21 stitches, so line them all up, chain one, slip stitch in the next stitch, and you're going to do a total of 21 of these all the way across. Adding the chain one in between makes sure that your seam doesn't end up too tight. It'll add a little bit of bulk to the seam, but it gives it some stretch as well so that your seam doesn't end up too tight, which can sometimes happen with slip stitch seams. Okay, I've come to the last stitch and that completes the seam, but I'm not going to fasten off because I'm going to use the same yarn for the edging. So there is my chain one slip stitch seam, and from the other side, that's what it looks like. Okay, so now let's do the edging. The first thing we're going to do is turn this right side out because we were working on the wrong side and now we want to work on the right side. So when you look at the seam, you should see the nice, neat right side of the seam. Now we're going to keep working around and we're going to work one stitch into every row. So this is the first row, which is the single crochet row, and you can see the top of this stitch got a little stretched out, but that is actually the first single crochet. So that's where we're going to put our first stitch. So chain one and then single crochet into that stitch or that row. Okay, now we're just going to go up every single row, and notice there's a single crochet at the edge of every single row. So you can just put one single crochet into each of these single crochets. It will cinch it a little bit together at the edges. It's a little bit tighter than the rest of the cowl, and that's what makes it puff out when you wear it. So it's intended to be a little tighter. It's not going to be as stretchy as the center part of the cowl. I'm nearing the end and there were 61 rows. So if I had counted, I'm sure I would have 61 stitches, but it's not really that important. You don't have to drive yourself crazy counting. If you have one extra or two extra or one fewer or two fewer, it's not going to be the end of the world. So just try to get one stitch in every row, but you know, if you're off by one or two, no big deal. This is a very forgiving pattern. Okay, I have reached the point where I started and I'm just going to join that with a slip stitch. Now I'm going to fasten this off and then do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to turn the work around here. I'm still on the right side. You can see the seam, the right side of the seam. I'm going to go ahead and join near the seam because I feel like that's the easiest way to make it look neat. It gives me a good place to weave in my ends. But really you could join anywhere you wanted to. But I'm going to join on this first row, this first single crochet right here. Just join my purple yarn because that's what I want to use for the edging. Chain one. And then do the same thing we just did, single crochet in the end of every single row. And when you reach your starting point, do a slip stitch in the very first stitch and go ahead and fasten off. Now all that's left to do is weave in these ends and our cowl will be finished. If you liked this video, please give me a thumbs up, share it with your friends, or leave me a comment. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel for more great videos. Thanks for watching.